Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to our third and sadly final in our series with our fantastic partners, HiBob. Great topic today, certainly on the top of everyone's needs to know and wants to know, workplace flexibility. What is it and why is it important? Looking forward to our conversations today with our fantastic panelists and introducing our wonderful host for today, Damien from HiBob.
Thanks so much. What a wonderful couple of sessions it's been, and a really great topic to round this out. Workplace flexibility. There's lots to unpack here, and we've got some great people to talk about this topic with us today. Really want to welcome Helen Comerford from Squiz, Chief People and Culture Officer, and also Renee Murphy, Head of People and Culture at Half Dome. Renee and Helen, welcome to the conversation.
It's good to be here.
I'll start off. I think it's always good just to get a little bit of context about your backgrounds and the companies that you're working with, so then we can talk a little bit more about workplace flexibility in relation to what you're currently doing. So, Renee, can you give us a little bit of context about your background and also Half Dome?
Yeah, absolutely, Damien. So currently at the moment, I'm in a new industry. I've moved across into the media industry. So I'm with a wonderful organisation called Half Dome, and in the role of Head of People and Culture. Before that, really extensive background in retail, actually, a little bit of a stint in not-for-profit. And I think probably one of the things that many people might be able to relate to on our call today is I started in operations. I started in general management sort of people roles. And not surprisingly, a lot of that starts to be centred pretty heavily around a lot of the people and culture, or HR as it used to be termed, I guess functions. And a couple of years ago, I went back and did my MBA and made a bit more of a conscious effort to stay in the people and culture space. So yeah,
amazing. What a journey. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much, Renee. And Helen, can you give us a little bit of context about your role over at Squiz and some of your previous experience?
Yeah, of course. So head up the people and culture function for Squiz globally. We're about 350 employees across the globe. We're a tech firm and digital experience platform. So creating building websites and portals. I'm really excited sort of time to be part of a business like that. And we've been through a lot of change as an organisation shifting into that world. Before that, I was at Deloitte, and before that at Foster's Group. So I've sort of done a mix of things across my career in terms of FMCG, professional services, engineering, which has sort of really set me up to the role today, all the different experiences and applying that knowledge into what we do and all the things that we, strive to achieve.
Yeah, amazing. And Renee, I love that point you make about how HR has become P&C. I was musing to myself the other day as to whether or not it was a rebrand, but that's probably a conversation for another day. I really want to start the conversation off by just understanding a little bit more about what does workplace flexibility actually mean for your businesses, and what are some of the things the trends that are coming through and the things that you're putting in place to create a more flexible workplace for your employees. And Helen, I might get you to kick us off.
Yeah, sure. Look, I think in terms of us at Squiz, it's really about creating an environment for people to be able to do the work that they need to do and also balance, day-to-day life a lot more than, what we were able to do previously. And so, going back about 2 years ago, we created Squiz Flex, which effectively was around, kind of work in the place that is best for you, provided you have, the team, the customer at the centre of that. And we've empowered our managers to be able to, make those decisions in the best interest of the team. It's not without its challenges, which I'm sure we'll get to later. But that, at the core of it is what it's all about.
So really starting to wrap the way work is done and when it's done around the individual and their needs, as opposed to it being maybe more traditionally, it's all about the business and what its needs are. And then
exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I was reflecting on that, once upon a time, we were all running to get to work at a certain point in time. And you literally work, like your morning was all around, I've got to be at work, say by 8. or 8:30 or whatever. And then, you know, working through and almost sitting there, like, yeah, I can think of a time when it really was everyone fighting to be the last person seen in the office.
Yeah.
You know, so it's a complete change from that world.
Yeah, huge shift in mindset. And Renee, I know you were talking about examples of that yesterday when we were briefing for this. People run into the office feeling like they were stressed because they were, you know, there at 9:15 instead of 9 on the dot. So, yeah, take us through how you're seeing workplace flexibility shift in your organisation and the discussions you're having.
Yeah, for sure. So Halftime are very progressive in this space, which is very exciting to be a part of. One of our people pillars is autonomy. So, you know, Helen, you were talking about empowering your team to, you know, thrive in an environment, find their best ways of working. And I know we'll unpack productivity a little bit later on, but, you know, really offering our team the ability to find what does flexible work would look like for them. I think it's moved on from it being just remote. You know, we really do try and, whilst it doesn't work all the time, but look for core hours of meetings. So that 10 to 3 approach where you can manage your time around, you know, whether it is dropping your kids off in the morning, whether it is grabbing that gym session in the morning, because, you know, you're exactly right. You know, it's got to be around that balance. And, you know, we're certainly finding that it's not a one size fits all. This is not something that, you know, a bit of a hot topic in the last week or so, but, you know, I think that it's always been an individual approach that we should have taken with flexibility. Needs to be a baseline and some boundaries, I think, because that then allows people to know how to work in an environment as well too. You know, we sort of like to know what's expected of us. But certainly from our perspective here, it's and it does take a bit of work, but it's around understanding how individuals work, how different teams work, how different roles work, whether they're client facing, whether they're more in the background. So we certainly try and lead from the front in that space, and you know, constantly evolving it.
Yeah, and it's such a broad topic, right? Like, to your point, it's not just about work from home anymore. There are so many more components around flexibility, you know, things about working around core hours, about understanding individual needs of each of the employees. It becomes quite an expansive topic, and it starts to become a lot of grey zones, right? And we were talking a little bit about this yesterday, but there's got to be pros and cons to the new world and like how we're living in this very flexible work environment. So I'd love, Renee, maybe if you can continue on and just give us a bit of a sense of where do you see the pros and the cons starting to creep in as we're trying to work out what flexibility means for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think I touched on it just before, but that individuality piece has got to be, you know, the biggest pro, right? We all work differently. We all operate and we all find our way to thrive and, you know, unlock and reach into our whole potential in a different way. So I think that's the major pro there. It's given us as individuals a way to, you know, bring our best to work. Helen, I have to share that you know, feeling of the guilt. Now, you know, that doesn't come with just being a parent. You know, we all feel guilt or maybe even judgment sometimes if we're not sitting in our seat at a certain time in the morning. Are we actually bringing our best if we're, you know, if we're not the first one there and the last one to leave? And I think that shift has been really, really significant. How on earth are you bringing your best to work when your first sort of hour and a half in the morning has been nothing but chaos, and you've arrived in the office and you just feel, you know, that sense of relief that you've either finally arrived there or you've battled all of the things that you probably didn't need to if perhaps you'd have come in half an hour later. And I did share that story. I had a wonderful you know, guy that worked with me in an organisation a couple of years ago, and every morning he'd come in and he was sort of sweating and it was panting and it was puffing. And I said to him one morning, what's going on? He's like, I'm always 15 minutes late. And I said, yeah, you are. And he said, I just can't get the kids to school. And I said, just start half an hour later. And that difference in his output and how connected he felt to the organisation. So, you know, there's some pretty quick, you know, basic wins in terms of culture as well too. I think also too, it's probably opened up the platform for different negotiations, Damien, as well too, in terms of REM. So no longer is it just around the salary package for us in when we consider a new role. There's other significant differences that come into play when we're either moving on from somewhere we've been for a little while or looking for that new adventure. And being able to talk about flexibility and how that works for the individual, I found has sort of opened up opportunities, perhaps for some people that we may not have been able to tap into before, but also to attract new talent as well. So there's lots from that side.
Yeah, it's a great point. We're seeing some really unique pieces creep in. We've got things like bomb balance days, which once a quarter you get off to reset. We've got work from anywhere for 3 months, so long as you can still operate your time zones, you're free to travel. Like there's some really interesting pieces starting to creep in. I'm hearing other companies pull into place as well. And I think the point you made about, having to rush to work in the morning, the psychological safety you get from not having to worry about that and just coming in, know that you can get your job done. If you're 15 minutes over, no one's looking at the clock. It's a very different way of working and certainly engaging with the employees. Yeah, some great points. And Helen, how about you? What are you seeing on I'm interested also on the cons. What are the downs?
So I think, I think the pros outweigh the cons, but I think it's that balance and managers being able to set expectations and manage those expectations. And, I think we still have a few blurred lines. So, I share the story where we have had people that are in meetings, they're presenting to a lot of people and they're trying to do childcare duties at the same time, and you've got kids calling all over them whilst they're trying to do a presentation, and it's a distraction. And of course, then managers are understandably sort of going, how do I manage that conversation? How do I have that conversation in a respectful way? Because we still want to support the fact that people need to sort of balance life and work much more than ever before. But as I said, I also think the pros way outweigh in terms of, attracting and retaining talent, but also in terms of how people feel about an organisation. And, so I think we've, at the end of the day, and this probably gets into that, it's like ultimately what is the output? If I think about going into this, into this style of working, I can remember people actually managers coming up to me and going, this person keeps arriving at 8:45. And at the time, I actually was like, are they doing the work you expect of them? What's the problem? If they are, what's the problem? And if they're not, then let's have that conversation. But if they are, so, but now that's not the issue. I can get up in the morning and do, work, go to the gym, do some work calls. I might arrive into the office at 10:30 or 11. No one bats an eyelid. And that's the same for everybody. So there is that side of things, but also respectful of different people wanting different things. Our engineers, for example, very rarely ever come into the office they don't want to. And I think I shared yesterday, we used to have our engineers based out at Parramatta. And sure, they were in an office together. It was dead silent because they talk and they banter all through Slack, which was, at the time, a very fascinating thing for me.
It's super interesting. It's, I remember back in the day when I was first in a job, if I'm like, train was delayed or something, I'd panic. I'd have to text my boss, and like the whole rigmarole of what time I arrived on work was a real production. But yeah, it's super interesting to see some of the pros and cons, and maybe some of the flexibility people take a little bit too far and don't understand. There's still, there's still deliverables that we need to focus on. And it kind of brings me to the next topic, which I know has been very topical. Productivity, the conversation. It's obviously one that's really, it's coming hand in hand with flexibility. As we go more flexible, people want to understand it. Different parts of the business want to understand that we're still being able to drive the same output or throughput. And so, measuring productivity has become, or at least discussing has become really like a topic du jour, if you will. Renee, how are those conversations happening at halftime or even just in your networks? What are people talking about when it comes to productivity?
Yeah, sure. I guess if I touch back on maybe two of the cons that I see that will probably then lead back into the productivity piece, and I think as sort of blunt as this is going to say is organisations that aren't prepared to have the conversation about what's not working and blaming the flexible or the need to be flexible as the problem. I think that if we're not prepared to unpack that, it's got to keep evolving, but just to sort of blame the fact that perhaps don't have enough people in the office visually as a product of that impacting productivity is I would say that's something that we need to sort of ruffle the feathers on. And just quickly to new employees, I think that's something that we need to consider in that approach as well, and that people actually, I think the instant responses that when we talk about flexibility, it's that working remote. There are a lot of people that I interact with daily within Half Dome, outside of the walls of Half Dome, that want to come to work.
Yeah.
So it's not taking the conversation to the extreme, and making sure that it's a real positive, positive part of the culture and the ethos of a business. So I guess when it comes to productivity, when things are measurable, that makes everything much easier. But we know that not all roles have absolute measurable key outcomes that you can look at often. So I guess that's really making sure that you are, like Helen said, comfortable with what is the quality of work that's coming out, being close to your employees and to your team as well too, and I guess looking for the signs that suggest that perhaps they're not being able to manage their time because perhaps they're finding that the lack of boundaries aren't necessarily what's best for them, or certain work as well too. I think one of the conversations that we've had in the last week is around perhaps a pitch, and how important it is to collaborate and to probably be close to each other, literally physically, at certain times. So it's also identifying what are some of those types of works, or types of work that are not necessarily every single day, that you might have to say, well, this is the sort of work where we get actually our best and we contribute our best. We feel even more connected to the work we're doing in an environment that is probably a little bit more present in the office versus at home. And I think it's about actually having those open conversations, which is where I started it. If we sit in the and are worried to sort of ruffle what's happened in the last sort of 6 months, or if we're not prepared to keep evolving this, then I think it will be a problem for organisations to really get their head around. So productivity's got to be less around a number of headcount in the office and number of people sitting on a seat, and far more about collaboration, culture, and outputs. So yeah.
Brilliant. I love the point you make about. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go.
I was just going to say really the point about how you onboard people. We all went through the process of onboarding through COVID. It worked, but it was amazing. There's a lot of that interpersonal stuff that you just missed, and also just learning by proximity, right? Like being able to sit around people and just ask questions and start to put the building blocks in of the foundation of how do I do this job. And I haven't seen an LMS yet that can replace that in-person conversation as great as they are. So it's a really valid point around.
That face-to-face, in those first couple of weeks, really is it can set somebody up for success. And I think there is a small balance, because you don't want to which we do have a brilliant flex policy, and then not have that for everyone and it be equally accessible. But I think if there's a purpose behind your new employee needing to be in the office 80% of the time for the first 2 weeks, then I think that's something that an organisation can own as well too. And interestingly enough, that I think some of the conversations we've had this side is then it doesn't just become around the new employee being onboarded. It's then the other employees, leaders, peers that then play a role in their onboarding as well too, and making sure they're present. So it's rather than just being centred on that particular individual.
And it's a great segue, and Helen, I'd love to hear from you a little bit about now that we're in a world of hybrid, remote flexibility, what are some of the observations you're having around the type of work that we're doing in the office? Is it different to what we're doing from home? Do we need to think about the physical layout of our office spaces to have a completely different purpose to what they might have, when we're purely work from office? What are you seeing?
It's really interesting because I think and I use this in a different context, but it depends, and I think it depends on again, we're talking about this being really about individuals. I think it depends on teams and individuals and what they're looking for. So, if I think about our offices, it's a real mix of some people coming in to, purposefully collaborate and connect. And, we've got groups of people that come in on specific days to get together to meet for lunch. And then you've got other people that prefer just to work in the office and are there just carrying out what they would do anywhere else at home or whatever. So it really does depend. And I think different companies are tackling this very differently. I know of organisations that have basically, kind of set up the offices all about collaboration and doing group work, whereas we're stuck with the blend, make it work. Sometimes it's for socialisation, sometimes it is to complete work, sometimes it's just to connect. You might, be working independently, but just connecting through, as normal.
Yeah, I worked in a great business that thought about the layout of the office. There was areas for loud work, so customer facing calls, being able to really just engage. It was quiet work. And typically you'd see you support your sales in the loud area. You'd see your engineers and your product designers up in the quiet area, and project rooms and stuff like that. It was a very interesting way to kind of think about how to create space around the type of work you did in the office.
Absolutely. I mean, we've toyed with changing the layout of the office, but we've sort of decided we just keep it as is, and people are sort of working we always had collab areas anyway, so we're kind of just working with that at the moment. I mean, probably an interesting point is we are looking at whether, so for example, in Sydney, we have an office for 100 people, and we would be lucky if once a week we get 30 or 40. So we're actually looking at whether we need to downsize.
Especially with everyone looking to do what's the mantra at the moment, more with less. I'm sure there's a lot of
there's a lot of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Renee, tell me your observations. What are you seeing about the type of work that's being done from the office these days, and how it might have changed?
Yeah. So actually, we've just gone the opposite way, Helen. We came out of a smaller, colder office, and we've just moved into a bigger, warmer one. So even though we've got a remote first and a really progressive approach to flexibility, I think it's an interesting one, isn't it? We've decided to continually, invest, I guess, in the space and make sure that we have got that as an option. And so far, so good. I think one of the big things in the topic we actually spoke about last week, Damien, was meetings and resetting. That's one that we can all relate to. One we all felt over the last couple of years, that every interaction became a meeting. So we had a bit of a think tank last week around sort of changing up the way that we've fallen into this way of working, and resetting some of those behaviours, and really re-looking at where is our time best spent. Perhaps we could bring back the mobile phone. Wow, that could be an amazing thing to do. But then just looking at some of the comms channels that we have in the business as well, and how are we using Slack effectively? Do we need to seek permission to have a conversation with somebody? Probably something we can all relate to. Hey, can I make a time to talk to you about that? Have the conversation. If you've got time now, let's keep moving. So I think it's sort of top of mind to running alongside this flexible approach is continually looking at our ways of working. Another one of our people pillars is flow. So being in a state of flow, and allowing our team to thrive in an environment where they can do their best work. So finding those better practices in terms of working together. So yeah, certainly meeting cadence has been something that's been on the topic. We don't have any perfect solutions yet. We're sort of still in identification mode. Yeah, I think that's really working out what the purpose behind us sort of coming together is. The other one we've been talking about is if we do have any all-ins, if we have meetings where the bulk of the team are in the office, is trying to have the meeting centred where the bulk of the team is. And if you're, again, we've felt recently that if you're 4 of you in the office and 3 or 4 of you on a Teams or similar, that can actually be really difficult. It can be really, really difficult for everybody involved. And, some people are actually even finding that they don't feel connected. So just being mindful.
Yeah, that's a really valid point. And actually, with our exec meetings, we've got, a group of us in Sydney and then everyone else in different parts of the globe. And what we've started doing is if we go into a meeting room in Sydney, but we all individually log in, so that at least then we're creating that sense of equalness. Because people were feeling like what would happen is Sydney were having side chats and not really thinking about the impact of that on the rest of the team.
Yeah, so,
yeah.
I don't know if anyone's
before all of this, but yet now it's much more front of mind, I think.
Yeah, agree.
We do the same thing. We're all 80% of us in the office, 20% of us in Victoria or remote. We still log in, but we're in person. It's a strange world. It was an interesting article that came out today. I don't know if anyone saw it, but Shopify has created a calculator that sits on top of the calendar that now calculates the cost depending on who's invited of each meeting. And it's a way to really get people to stop putting meetings in that can cost $5,000 for 45 minutes. And it's an interesting take on this. It was a really interesting take. So I quite like it. It's definitely an ongoing conversation in a lot of places. How do you make sure meetings are warranted and not just a waste of time for everybody? Super interesting. There's a great question that's come through that is actually perfectly timed with one that I was going to ask you anyway around, having conversations with the C-suite. And a lot of the time I feel like HR is somewhat of an intermediary between the employees and the business needs and the balancing act of really shaping both to get the best out of both. And you have to think about both sides of the equation here. And really interesting, like how are you managing those conversations with your directors, the board, your C-suite versus your employees? It's got to be a bit of a war of a bit of a pulling war here, a tug of war, if you will, between like the needs of both sides. So, Helen, really interested from your side. What are the conversations you have in your C-suite?
I mean, look, we've got to keep having the conversations because I feel like every time you feel we're there, we've embraced this, we're all on the same page, someone will ask a question like, when are we all coming back into the office? Or, something of that time. And I'm seeing Renee laughing and going, I know everyone I speak to has had that battle. And that's why, and to Renee's point, you say we've got to keep that conversation going. Like we've got to keep bringing it up, and we've got to be confident that this is the right thing to do. And it's pointing out what it means. And everyone can find an article to suit their side of the fence. So I have had articles thrown at me from different, members of board or exec or whoever to, make their point. But I think, the results will speak to itself, and also, again, it's the attract and retain talent. So it matters, and it matters differently to different people. But really, we've just got to keep having the conversation. We've got to be confident. And then we've got to be willing to listen as well. So it's not about being defensive, because if you go on with a defensive angle, then it ends up being, tense. It's actually, sometimes you got to stop and go, you know what, I just want to think about this perspective, walk away and really think about what are you going back with? How are we making this work? Why is someone saying that? Because there's usually a reason behind why someone says that. So obviously they're experiencing something, and it's understanding that and then thinking around your response to that in relation to, again, always sit there in any situation and put your shoes on, the other person's shoes on your foot. just to make sure, hang on, is there something I'm missing here that I should be considering?
I'm sure it depends, which is I really love your approach to this, because it really is, anything about flexibility is really the underlying strategy is it depends, because there's so many variables in play for each business, right? But I'm really interested in your point that you made about, the position that someone might be taking about wanting to go back to work or get people back to the office in full time. Have you cracked the code or got any insights you can share with us on maybe why they're thinking that way and what leads them to want to push everyone back?
I think one of the things, I was thinking about this a lot and overnight, and actually, I think it depends a lot on background of organisations you've worked with in the past and the style of those organisations. And so I think if you've had people who've worked in really large corporates and perhaps sort of more of that private equity type environment, or hardcore professional services, and I know a lot of professional services organisations are not very, very flexible, but if your background in the old world is that and that's all you've ever known, then that comes through in the way you think productivity and goals will be achieved. I've got to see it to believe it.
Yeah.
But I always, it depends, because it really does depend. I mean, we also, and I think, Renee earlier was talking about onboarding new people. I also think there is a group of perhaps newer people in the workforce that actually would prefer to be among people and closer in the office and, learning the ways of working. So it depends, really. There's a lot of different perspectives out there, but I do think we've got a massive pool of people in the middle that it depends really does apply to, because also I think day to day that view can change.
Yeah, sure. And it's a great point you make. Maybe there's a fear of change, or just a fundamental misunderstanding of what it's like to actually work in the workplace now, as opposed to be on the board, or there's a separation between what they're doing and what others are doing, and maybe that's just an educational piece. I also sometimes wonder, cheekily, if it's also about the size of the cost of the office building and whether or not that's
yes, definitely. Yes.
I remember the Salesforce announcement of driving everybody back in just as they put up the lettering on the Salesforce Tower in Sydney. Felt like there might have been some overlay there. That's all hypothesis. Renee, tell me about your side of things. What are the conversations you're seeing with the C-suite?
Yeah. Completely relate to the one-liners, and we've all felt them. I'm sure there's everybody on this call that's had them from a place of, it's been a reaction to something. And I guess I wanted to sort of harp on that point, because I think and I'll probably ruffle some feathers here, I think it's easy to say, let's bring everyone back. I think it's easy to come with that approach that says, all right, it's time to get everyone back. We're going to mandate this. We're going to move here. We're going to expect people to be in the office for X percentage of time, because the reality is it takes a lot of work to find out, and we're continually finding out how best to support our team and provide an environment for them to thrive in. So I think from, for conversations that are being had with CEOs, then I guess my position would be very similar to Helen's. Tell me where this is coming from. Give me either an example or a number of examples, or help me understand your position so I can find the answers, right? The other side is, I think, go to the people. One thing that we do a lot here at Half Dome is we probably ask even too many questions. We're very data led, and we run surveys really, really often. So don't be scared to ask those questions, and don't be scared to get, sometimes we do sit in a room and we think, oh, do the team, do they want to be in here X amount of time? Do they want call hours? What does flexibility look like? Go and ask them. Create some working groups and work with them to really empower and provide that autonomy, because sometimes it is noise. Sometimes it's a fear of, I don't want to raise it because it'll become more of a problem. And I think let's have the courage to keep having the conversation. Is our approach to flex still working for you all? Are there ways that we can do things differently? And not making it, I think, a bit of a taboo topic. Yeah.
Really good points. It's actually been a theme throughout this series, making decisions, or at least asking the questions, gathering data, and then making informed decisions has been a really big component to a lot of CPOs, and businesses are tackling the rate of change that we're seeing. Is consistently getting check-ins with the employees and hearing from them about how they're feeling about things. What are the things that are getting them away from being more productive or being more engaged? And this is certainly one of those topics that I think can lean either way if you don't quite get it right. Less productive, less engaged, not a great outcome for anybody really. So being able to get that happening on a regular basis and taking an iterative approach where you can tweak and continue to kind of understand that this is a free-flowing discussion, it's not set in stone, is I think a really interesting approach to take to it as well. Yeah, some great. Just before I ask our last question, and the last question is going to ask me, I'm going to ask you to look into your crystal balls in a minute and kind of predict the future for us. But I'd really love anyone that's watching at the moment. We're going to, in a second, turn over to a bit of an open Q&A. So if there's anything that you really want to know from either Helen or Renee, please drop it in the comments, and I'll make sure to ask them at the end. So right, crystal ball time. Helen. Has flexibility peaked, or is it only just begun? Which way is the elastic band going? Is it going to snap and come back to center, or are we only just part of the way through, stretching it out and seeing how far this goes?
I think we've only just begun, and I guess I don't know when, but I think it will become a norm. And I think when we get to that, we currently have the fluctuations of we're all supportive, and then the bombshell drops of someone deciding that we've got to change it. But I honestly think we're just at the beginning. But I do see this 3 to 5 years time. I actually think this will just be an accepted norm. Yeah. And it's like anything; it just takes time to get there, and it's that perseverance.
Yeah, really good insights there. Renee, what do you think? We stretched the rubber band too far? Is it coming back to center, or is are we just at the beginning of the journey?
Yeah, we've definitely not peaked at all. And I touched on it earlier. It's going to be a conversation in our businesses, I think, forever. And it's not a set and forget. It's not this is our policy, and we'll review it every couple of years. I think that if organisations, for me, this is part of your culture. Again, harping on the way that we empower our team, how we provide that right environment. I think it's a little bit dangerous for us to probably not think about this as part of an element within a people and culture strategy moving forward. It'll be something that we look at when it comes to certainly purely location, but then also two ways of working. What systems do we adopt? What systems do we let go of? I think that this will underpin quite a number of conversations that are having at that C-suite level around ensuring that we can attract top talent, that we can retain top talent, and I think education's shifted significantly in the last 3-4 years, and it was even before that. To think that the workplace won't as well, certainly how people learn, timing of how people learn, different mediums and ways that people learn, that surely we can acknowledge that if that's what the generations that are coming through are exposed to is sort of constantly new ways of engaging, new ways of exploring, gathering information, sharing information, then I think organisations have to bear that in mind as well too. So I
think the point around productivity is key. I think when the results are there, it's then it becomes less of a front of mind conversation, like a Therese, but I think it's about us getting it's just part of how we operate. It's part of that strategy. It's not that front and center bam, it's just underpinning everything. But,
and it doesn't sit aside from it, I think, too, to your point, Helen. I think, there's different parts of our people strategy that do come into play over time, and as businesses evolve and grow, and that it can't be seen as a bolt-on. It can't be seen as a box that we've got to tick and something we've got to address. If you're genuine about it being part of your culture, then I think you've got to consider it through all aspects of that people strategy. So.
I think that was a really interesting point you made. That there's a new generation of people entering the workforce that see flexibility as a standard now. Much like we were talking about the board of directors who saw working from office as the standard, we've now created a bench line, and that's going to be really hard to move away from as that generation and generations to follow come through the workforce and become leadership and directors themselves. And I think one of the things I sometimes muse about in the long game is companies like Salesforce, and Deloitte, and some of these big companies that are saying to mandate the return to work. How is that going to be impacting their ability to attract talent? And does that mean there's a huge shift in talent? And because, in my mind, talent's the thing that gets you to the ultimate outcome of a business and makes you successful. You can't attract the right talent. It's really hard to hit your goals and targets as an organization. So really interesting levers around, what's going to happen in the future. What a great conversation. I know, Sally, thanks for pulling this together. Helen, Renee, some really great insights today, and really appreciate you joining us to talk about such an important topic as it evolves. I think the thing I'm going to really take away from this is it depends. The greatest first answer to any question on workplace flexibility I've ever heard. So I'm taking that one with me. Yeah. So over to you.
Fantastic. I definitely taking the it depends with me as well, but we've had some great insights today. Really huge shout out, ladies. Thank you, Renee and Helen, for joining us today and sharing all of your insights and knowledge and experience. Hopefully everyone that's joined today online can take a little bit away, with a little bit of inspiration as to how to move forward with, I think, a topic that's not going to go away quietly. I think it's around to stay for a little while longer. So thank you so much for joining us. And also, as we wrap up with this series, a huge thank you and shout out to our wonderful sponsors and partners, Damien and HiBob. It's been a fantastic series. I've loved listening to every minute of it. Thank you for bringing so many great topics and conversations to light and sharing that with our wider audience. So thank you to you as well, Damien. It's been fantastic having you host.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Let's do it again soon.
Absolutely. Now, hopefully there might be some of you, maybe not all of you online today, but some of you might be thinking, who is Damien and HiBob? I know as a TA recruiter myself, I have used HiBob and I've absolutely loved it. So I'm a user and a lover of the platform. So HiBob, for those of you that don't know, please go and check them out. HiBob.com. It is a fantastic modern HRIS, which is built for fast-growing modern businesses that will help you with your retention and your engagement to other topics which we've also touched on in this series, very conveniently. So those of you that would like to familiarise yourself, please jump onto hibob.com and have a look. We've got some more exciting series coming up, I believe, with HiBob. So I'm very excited to see what the future holds there as well. And I believe you might be having some more in-person talent management workshops coming up as well, Damien. So please reach out to Damien or reach out to myself. I'm more than happy to put you in touch with the team at HiBob if you'd like to experience an in-person event, which are not as common as they used to be. So that sounds exciting coming up as well.
Yeah, amazing. Again, thank you so much for everything. Renee, Helen, Sally, great conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was great.
Well,
Thanks for joining us.
have a great day.
See ya.
Bye-bye.